The cold Atlantic wind carried the Mayflower toward a land already suffering from sickness. Entire native villages had fallen months earlier, leaving silent fields and abandoned homes. The Wampanoag watched from the tree line, uncertain whether these newcomers were a blessing or curse. The settlers staggered ashore, starving and desperate, barely clinging to life. Winter punished them brutally, burying weak bodies beneath snow. Out of compassion, the Wampanoag chose to help the dying strangers. They taught the settlers to plant, hunt, and survive in this new world. A fragile trust formed, built on hope but trembling with fear. That autumn, they gathered for a simple feast that later became a national myth. The moment felt peaceful, but beneath it lay storms the future would not forgive. After the feast, the settlers began drawing boundaries on land that wasn't theirs. They wrote claims with ink while ignoring centuries of native ancestry. The Wampanoag protested softly at first, asking only for fairness. But the settlers insisted the land was unused, if not fenced by European standards. Slowly, farms expanded into native forests, cutting through sacred grounds. Rumors spread among colonists that natives were threatening their future. Fear became fuel, pushing more settlers to seize land before natives could resist. More ships arrived, bringing more families, more weapons, more hunger for land. The Wampanoag felt the world closing in around them. And then came the spark that turned fear into fire. Colonists accused Wampanoag men of plotting war without evidence. 3 were captured, tried unfairly, and executed. Their deaths tore open wounds that could never heal. Metacom, son of Massasoit, could no longer trust the settlers his father once helped. Tension snapped, erupting into what history now calls King Philip's War. Settler militias stormed native villages, burning homes and fields. The Wampanoag fought back fiercely for survival. But disease, famine, and numbers were against them. Colonists declared days of Thanksgiving after wiping out native communities. These Thanksgiving days celebrated victories in blood, not peace. Women and children fled into frozen swamps to escape capture. Many starved before reaching safety. Entire tribes disappeared, erased from the land they had lived on for millennia. Metacom fought until his allies were dead or captured. Betrayed by an informant, he was cornered in a swamp. Colonial soldiers shot him, ending the war but not the suffering. His body was mutilated and displayed as a warning. His head was set on a spike for 2 decades. Survivors were sold into slavery across the sea. Others were forced to serve colonial families. The colonists divided the remaining Wampanoag lands among themselves as trophies. Fields once filled with native crops now held colonial fences and livestock. Sacred burial grounds were plowed and replanted, erasing generations. Children grew up hearing only the colonial version of the story. They were taught the natives were savages, not victims. Thanksgiving was reshaped over decades into a tale of unity that never existed. The real suffering behind it was buried under cheerful myths. Survivors of the war were forbidden to gather in large groups. Their religion was outlawed, their leaders executed, their stories silenced. The colonists renamed rivers, hills, and villages to wipe away native identity. By the early 1700s, the Wampanoag lived under colonial rule with no land of their own. Starvation forced many into labor for the same people who destroyed their homes. Generations were raised hearing the lie that the first Thanksgiving was peaceful. Meanwhile, native families remembered the graves left behind. Thanksgiving proclamations continued to celebrate colonial victories. These proclamations never mentioned the blood spilled to make them. Native traditions were mocked or banned outright. Their languages faded, spoken only in whispers to avoid punishment. Many were forced into Christianity to avoid further violence. The colonists wrote history as if they had always belonged to this land. The real story was reduced to a paragraph, then to a sentence, then to nothing. Each November, settlers celebrated prosperity, while natives mourned survival. Thanksgiving became a national tradition of forgetting. The Wampanoag's loss was replaced with cheerful paintings and children's plays. Pain was rewritten as harmony. Genocide was softened into conflict in school books. Families gathered around tables while native bones lay beneath their towns. No one questioned why only one side of the story survived. The Wampanoag dwindled, but they never disappeared. Each generation preserved fragments of the truth in stories whispered at night. They remembered the feast not as unity, but as a symbol of what came after. The land itself seemed to hold scars from the war. Old trails once walked by thousands became lonely paths. Rivers that fed villages now ran past colonial mills. The forest could still hear echoes of cries long buried. By the 1800s, Thanksgiving was promoted as a wholesome family holiday. Writers romanticized the feast, removing all brutality from the tale. They painted natives as cheerful helpers who vanished afterward. The truth was too heavy for national pride, so they rewrote it into a story children could memorize. Native suffering was excluded to protect the American narrative. Meanwhile, surviving Wampanoag families faced poverty and discrimination. They were treated as relics, not as people betrayed by history. The government took more land under new laws. Children were forced into English-only boarding schools. They were punished for speaking their own language. Their culture was squeezed into museum displays instead of living homes. Every Thanksgiving, the cheerful myth grew stronger, and every Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag grief stayed hidden. The story was no longer just forgotten. It was erased on purpose. By the early 1900s, Thanksgiving became a patriotic symbol. Textbooks praised the Pilgrims, but ignored the devastation that followed. Children dressed as pilgrims in plays, while native history remained in shadows. The Wampanoag watched their ancestors' tragedy turned into celebration. Generations of Americans grew up unaware of the injustice beneath the holiday. Gratitude replaced accountability. The myth became more powerful than the truth. Old wounds reopened quietly each November. The land still remembered the burning villages, but the people celebrating rarely knew what had been lost. In the mid-1900s, Native activists began speaking out. They challenged schools to teach the real story. The movement faced resistance from those who feared changing tradition. Thanksgiving was still seen as untouchable. But the voices of the Wampanoag grew louder. They recounted the betrayals, the war, the executions. They shared stories passed down through centuries of silence. The truth started reaching classrooms slowly. Students learned the feast was real, but the peace was brief. They learned the Thanksgiving after massacres was real too. More historians uncovered diaries and letters hidden for centuries. These records described war, displacement, and loss. The public could no longer ignore what really happened. The myth cracked, but did not fully break. Thanksgiving continued, but the discussion around it began to change. Some people now honored the holiday with awareness of both joy and pain. Others protested the holiday entirely. The Wampanoag asked only for recognition of the truth. They wanted their ancestors' suffering acknowledged. They wanted people to understand that history is not a single story. Today, Thanksgiving is celebrated by millions. But beneath every table lies a shadow of the past. Many families still don't know what truly happened. Others are beginning to question what they were taught. The Wampanoag people still exist, still preserving their culture. Their history did not end with the feast or the war. It continued through resilience and memory. They remember the kindness that began the story and the betrayal that followed. They remember the peace their ancestors hoped for and the violence that peace could not stop. They remember Metacom's struggle for survival. They remember the children taken, the lands lost. They remember how a feast became a myth, and how a myth erased their suffering. But the truth survived because they carried it. It survived through memory, stronger than any legend. It survived through the land that still whispers their names. It survived through historians willing to dig deeper. It survived because injustice cannot stay buried forever. And today, more people are willing to listen. More people honor both gratitude and truth. More people understand Thanksgiving is not just a celebration. It is a reminder of generosity met with suffering. A reminder of history's cost. A reminder that kindness does not always protect from betrayal. A reminder that stories can heal only when told honestly. A reminder that truth demands courage. And a reminder that the Wampanoag still stand, still remembering. So, when Thanksgiving comes, the question remains, will we celebrate only the myth or honor the truth beneath it?